Everything around us, from the gas in our cars to the food we eat, it all comes from the Earth's natural resources. But how often do we really stop and think about that? About the incredible, complex journey those resources took to get to us? It's a story of amazing human ingenuity for sure, but it's also a story with some pretty serious unintended consequences. So let's dive into this relationship we have with the planet that keeps us all going. And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. For most of us, right, the path from some mineral deep in the ground to the smartphone in our pocket is, well, it's totally invisible. We've built this world of unbelievable convenience, but it's all sitting on a foundation that we rarely see, and yeah, we often take it for granted. And that brings us to the real heart of the issue, this constant push and pull. On one hand, using all these resources has fueled just incredible human progress. I mean, it's lifted billions of people out of poverty and basically created the modern world. But on the other hand, doing all that has pushed our planet's systems right to the edge. It's a classic story of a boom, a bust, and our search for some kind of balance in the middle. Okay, so let's start with the boom. For like most of human history, our ability to actually use the planet's resources was pretty limited. But then a handful of key innovations kicked off what scientists now call the Great Acceleration, a total explosion in our use of everything the planet has to offer. What's just wild about this timeline is how everything gets squeezed together at the end. I mean, think about it. It took thousands of years for us to go from taming animals to inventing a simple metal plow. But then, whoosh, in just a couple of hundred years, the Industrial Revolution and mechanized farming completely changed our relationship with the land, transforming us from farming societies into city-dwelling ones. And you can see how this all just snowballed, right? These huge technological leaps meant we could produce food on a scale nobody had ever dreamed of. That extra food, in turn, supported a massive boom in the human population, which then provided all the people needed to work in our brand new industries. And if you want to get a sense of just how intense this acceleration is, just look at this number. In the last 50 years alone, the amount of fertilizer we put on our soil has gone up by 20 times. 20! That one stat really shows you the sheer power of our modern farming system. Yeah, it tripled crop production worldwide, but it also demanded these massive inputs of energy and minerals. But of course, all this incredible progress came with a pretty steep price tag. That same explosion in productivity started to create this wave of unintended and often really damaging environmental problems. This was the bust that was always kind of lurking in the shadow of the boom. So let's start with water. Farming, the very foundation of our civilization, is incredibly thirsty. As you can see here, a massive 70% of all the fresh water we pull from rivers and lakes and the ground goes straight to watering crops. So for every 10 gallons of fresh water we use as a species, 7 of them are going to our farms. It is the single biggest user of our most critical resource. And it's not just the water. The very soil we need to grow our food is in trouble. Our intensive farming practices have left the land exposed to erosion from wind and rain. And the results? Right now, about a third of all the world's cropland is losing its precious topsoil faster than nature can possibly replace it. And then, of course, there's the air we all breathe. The fossil fuels that kicked off the Industrial Revolution and still power so much of our world release this whole cocktail of pollutants into the atmosphere. We're talking about the very things that cause smog, create acid rain, and fuel the greenhouse effect that's warming our planet. Now, here's a side effect you might not think about as much. Our super-connected world of global trade and travel has accidentally created a superhighway for invasive species. These are plants and animals that get introduced to new places where they have no natural predators, and they can just wreak havoc. And make no mistake, these invasions are not just a small problem. In North America, for instance, the gypsy moth has literally eaten its way through huge areas of forest. Other invaders have basically wiped out the American chestnut and American elm trees, which used to dominate the landscape. They can fundamentally change entire ecosystems. So people started to see what was happening. The polluted rivers, the smog-filled cities, the dying forests, and they began to realize that our progress was costing us way too much. This growing awareness lit a fire, and it sparked a brand new kind of movement, one that was focused on protecting the health of the planet itself. Pretty early on, 2 main schools of thought kind of popped up. You had conservation, which is all about using our resources wisely and sustainably, so there's plenty left for future generations. And then you had preservation, which argued for protecting certain wild places completely from any human use at all. And that distinction, that debate, still shapes how we talk about the environment today. A huge turning point in all of this was back in 1962 with Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring. It was this powerful, eye-opening book about the dangers of chemical pesticides, showing how these poisons could work their way up the food chain and cause all kinds of harm. For millions of people, it was a total wake-up call. And once people were awake, that awareness turned into action, fast. The late 60s and early 70s were just a whirlwind of activity. You had landmark laws like the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts setting national pollution standards. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, was created to enforce those rules. And then in 1970, the very first Earth Day saw 20 million Americans participate. It was official. The environmental movement was a major force. Which brings us to today, where this search for balance has gone global. The basic challenge is still the same. How do we power our modern world and provide for everyone in it without wrecking the very natural systems that we all depend on? And at the absolute center of this puzzle is our energy dilemma. On one side, you have fossil fuels. They pack a lot of energy, and our entire world is built around them. But they come with huge environmental costs. On the other side are renewables. They're clean, they're sustainable, but they have their own challenges, like intermittency. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Now, technologies like these wind turbines are a massive piece of the solution. Wind power was one of the fastest growing energy sources back in the 90s, and it's still a key player as we try to shift to cleaner energy. It's renewable, it doesn't produce greenhouse gases or cause acid rain, it's a major path away from fossil fuels. But this whole transition isn't just about technology. It's also deeply political. As this table lays out, developed and developing nations just have different priorities. Wealthier countries are focused on cutting their emissions, while developing countries are trying to achieve economic growth and argue, hey, they should get to use their resources to develop just like the rich countries did. Figuring out a path forward that's fair for everyone, that is one of the biggest diplomatic challenges of our time. And so that leaves us with the big one, the essential question of our era. There really aren't any easy answers here. But understanding the story of how we got here, the incredible boom, the painful bust, and the slow awakening, well, that's the first step. The search for a sustainable balance is truly the defining challenge of our century, and it's a story that involves every single one of us.